JD and also Brandon are going to be on in a couple minutes because they are definitely not going to want to not talk about this one. But this is the Sports Den. So, as always, basically, we're going to be breaking down sports, what's going on in there. The big thing that we're going to be discussing heavily in this case will be the breaking trade that happened between Chris Paul and, more importantly, Bradley Beal, swapping one for the other with a couple extra players thrown into the mix, what it means for both teams, what the cost is going to be for both teams, and will it actually help either team. So in this case, as the rest of them are going to be rolling on, this is definitely one of the things that Obi is extremely knowledgeable about, impassioned about, and possibly opinionated about. So, sir, give me your thoughts on this one, man.
Who won this deal? My opinion, Denver won this deal. I think that the reigning champs are one of the most underrated teams that we've ever seen. I know I haven't been on, so maybe we have talked about it. But I feel like Joker is if you take whatever attributes you want to take for an NBA player and you give Shaq all his attributes and you subtract one from every one of those attributes and add them all into shooting, you've built Joker. He's incredible, an amazing player. And I don't think Beal replacing Paul puts this Phoenix team over Denver. So that's why I think Denver won. Overall, I do think it improves Phoenix marginally, which, is hard to do. Phoenix is a great, great, great team. So let me not act like Phoenix can't go ahead and win it with Paul. They can certainly win it with Paul. They can certainly win it with Bradley Beal as well. I just don't think this was a big enough increment because when push comes to shove, next year, come the playoffs, I'll take out a coin and flip it in the air. Heads, the great Kevin Durant plays. Tails, he doesn't play, or we realize he is an aging superstar and not a superstar anymore. So that's why I think Denver won this deal. I think that this was not a big enough move to make Denver afraid. Welcome, JD.
Yes, welcome, JD. So I'm going to throw this question out at both of you guys right now. Do you feel that maybe Phoenix made this as a little bit of a panic move? After what happened last year, do you think maybe it was one of those things that you just kind of just grasp, cling, and do whatever you need to get back in?
It's definitely, I wouldn't say panic move, but there's definitely a bit of desperation in here, especially as Chris Paul came up short in the playoffs yet again. They got blown out in Game 7 again. They fired their coach. They also have new ownership who is trying to put their stamp on things. So this move is surprising because of the numbers involved. But I've brought up on shows before about how these supermax contracts, or as I will call them now, stupid max contracts, basically are so big and overpriced that these players can only be traded for each other. That's why you have the same few players in all of these trades. Chris Paul, John Wall. John Wall has now been replaced by Bradley Beal. The Clippers, Houston, Phoenix, Washington are always involved in these because these are the teams that are still dumb enough to keep handing out these deals to players that don't deserve them.
And Durant has come up in these trades a few times, I think, in some of your conversations about this topic.
Yes, Ben Simmons as well.
Yeah, and Harden. That was the other thing.
Harden was another one.
Yeah.
So, I agree. And that's why I guess, to me, on that exact point, there is one player who I think is one of these, I'm going to use your term, stupid max contracts, who, if they can get to move, can make a difference. And that's Lillard. I think Lillard is still good enough that if one of these teams makes the trade for him, let's say Harden for Lillard, or Beal gets moved for Lillard. Lillard ends up on Miami, as has been talked about. He, I think, is that guy who is significantly better than the rest of the guys at this pay scale who are movable that we're talking about. And again, so if that had been the deal, I think then I'd say Phoenix made a deal that matters. I guess the one thing I left out, which JD did bring up, is maybe Beal won't go down in the playoffs as Chris Paul has done basically his entire career. So Beal has more availability than Chris Paul does. But again, I still just think that this Denver team that we saw, Jokic, Has been the best player for 3 years. And I give him another 2 years, maybe 3 years of being the best player in the NBA. So I'm not. I think, like I said, I think they're marginally better, but it comes down to what JD said. You can't move a superstar in this sport like you can in baseball because of the contract structure. So you put two big names out there. It sounds great, but really, what changed?
And the other thing is that we don't know what Bradley Beal can do in the playoffs because he's never in the playoffs because the Wizards are garbage every year. So we really have no idea about what will he be like in the clutch or in the playoffs because he has no experience with that.
Yeah,
and with a lot of these teams, because they have the one player taking up so much cap percentage, they're lone wolves, and you usually do not get success with one team dominating like that. The only contract of that type that has been successful was Steph Curry. That's because the Warriors have the money and essentially don't care about the salary cap and can spend as much as they want in luxury tax money. And Steph Curry is one of the best players on the planet. Players like Bradley Beal and James Harden, not so much.
No, 100%. If you pick the right guy for your supermax contract, you're okay. But it's got to, it's not like the NFL where you can say, running backs don't matter, but Saquon is better than most other running backs, so I'll franchise tag him and pay him as much as I possibly can for 1 year and get away with it. Or I'll pay my quarterback a lot of money. But in the NBA, I mean, it could not – our boy Brandon could have shown up at a better time. Right now, Miami's the team not doing this, and they're the best team consistently over the last 4 years in terms of the results they're getting. So, if they're the ones who land Dame Lillard, like I said earlier, well, we're all scared in the East, especially me. But I think that's the point that JD is making, and I agree with it. If you're going to throw the Supermax, you better hit the right guy. And that second-tier player, when you pay him, either suck it up and be old school Steinbrenner, new school Golden State, or you're done. You're going nowhere in terms of winning. Maybe you're making money, but you're not winning.
Go for it, Brandon. All yours, sir.
Yeah, no, this was very funny, this whole thing coming down, because I was at work and I had heard that this trade was happening, and I go for East or West, East, and I'm thinking through, and I'm like, this was the Bradley Beal trade. It kind of just one of those things that came out of left field, and I said this in our group chat off air earlier, that between Westbrook, John Wall, Chris Paul now, three of the most overpaid or paid, the highest paid point guards probably within the last decade or so, have all not necessarily been traded for each other, but their teams have essentially traded those contracts around. And it's kind of now been this full circle merry-go-round where all three of those players have now been members of the Wizards, Rockets, and Clippers. So it's kind of very funny in that kind of symmetry of it. But yeah, I had seen reports that maybe Washington is kind of using Chris Paul as another trade piece, that they'll ship him off, try and get another team in this and bring a three-team trade, essentially. And I don't know. I don't necessarily know why Washington is going for this, especially for a guy that is, in basketball terms, so old, right? In Chris Paul, where, I mean, what are you going to get out of him? What are you going to get out of him with that roster? Because obviously other moves are going to be made by the time season starts and opening night tip-off for them. It's just, I don't know. It just kind of seems like a typical Washington move where they're trying to, have some type of gate attraction moment or gate attraction move, not necessarily the greatest basketball move. And is that a question to maybe their front office? They just got the new president of basketball operations there. So this is kind of his first major move as kind of heading that ship. I don't know. I still see Washington as a out of the April foolishness, team, or maybe they could sneak up to a 10 or 9. But in terms of a traditional playoffs team, I don't see Washington really doing more than what they just have been doing basically in the last number of years. I think with John Wall and Beal, I think they have one playoff series. I mean, it might have been one series win. They got to the second round a bunch of years ago. I think it was during LeBron's Cleveland years, but we know that second round loss from there. So really,
like the Eddie Jordan years coaching. Like the Eddie Jordan years was the last time with Gilbert Arenas was the last time Washington really made any kind of noise as far as being a consistent playoff team.
No, Jordan famously never. Well, I guess infamously, because nobody ever talks about it. Didn't finish under 500. Didn't make the playoffs. It was Arenas. It was those mid 2000s teams that were somewhat decent. They got John Wall, and then they kind of teetered off since then, and have become a kind of lost franchise in terms of being very forgetting that they're even a team, honestly. And you had Bradley Beal there. That was kind of this that you mentioned before, this kind of Damian Lillard type figure where you're that style of player. You're loyal to the team and you're kind of doing your thing. But it's not really adding up to a lot other than Dame, who was able to get to a conference finals and consistently got Portland to some nice playoff moments. But then the Phoenix aspect of it to now have a team that is so, first off, you have the most incomplete team in terms of having so many roster spots empty that you have to fill. And then on top of that, you're going to have a top-heavy team. I mean, we remember the LeBron quote famously from years ago, where top-heavy is bleep, referring to the Cavs. But, I mean, this team is going to be like that on steroids. And to have that amount of money put into that little amount of players, and now to have to fill out a roster with that, I think that's going to be very difficult. But, I mean, they seem to have some smart guys in Phoenix. But we'll see how it plays out on the court. We'll see what Phoenix does with this trio now. I know there's kind of some of these super team CBA rules that they're kind of going back and forth on, and I don't know. In terms of that, I don't believe in restricting teams from adding whatever players. It's just at that point, what does it look like? What were the optics of it? It's hard for me to tell a team that you can't go get a player when that's what you do. That's half of your business, is going out and getting players. But we'll see how this plays out. We're very far and away from training camp starting, let alone the season. And we'll see how these teams shape up, and we'll see what other moves are made.
So in your opinion, I'm going to basically start with Obi on this, Brandon, and then I'm sorry, Obi, JD, and then Brandon on this one. If you look at this trade, apples to apples, who won?
I think apples to apples, I would rather have Beal than Chris. I can't make it through the playoffs, Paul. Apples for apples. Now, one of the things that Brandon stirred in my mind, what is Washington doing? What is Washington doing? Maybe this is a process type move, right? They're going to start the process. They're going to bring in Paul. Listen, here he is. He's a point guard. He's older. Maybe they just are ready. We're going to put him right onto the coaching staff, and that's how we're going to build this team. We're going to get him. We're going to make him love it here, and he's going to be our future coach as we lose for a few more years and start to generate draft picks. And maybe that's the plan, because I don't see what the draw for Paul is at this point in his career, especially since you could have gotten him for nothing, since Phoenix said they were going to cut him. So I don't quite get it. Maybe they did Bradley Beal a favor. Bradley wanted out. This was the best they could get for him. Again, I'm with you, Brandon. What was Washington thinking? Why would they even take Paul? Because I think Beal's the better player at this point in their careers. Just flat out, I think Beal's the better player.
JD?
As I look up the contract numbers, I say Washington wins this. Why? Because Washington only has one more year guaranteed.
Okay.
That they have to pay Chris Paul, just like the Harden for Simmons deal last year. That's exactly what this.
That one we've talked about more than a few times. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Right, but where the Sixers won that trade just by getting rid of Simmons in his future years. Issues with Harden notwithstanding, and we'll see what happens as far as his contract moves this offseason. But Phoenix is now on the hook for 4 years of Bradley Beal until they can unload him for the next stupid max contract trade, with whatever draft picks going back and forth to sweeten the deal. But Chris Paul has 1 year guaranteed, according to Spotrac, has 1 year guaranteed at $28.4 million, and then a partial guarantee for 30.8, where it's 30.8 total, 15.8 guaranteed for that's or actually no, wait, sorry, I'm reading this wrong. So this upcoming, basically they're on the hook for this upcoming, the partial guarantee is this coming season, 23-24. And then he has a non-guaranteed $30 million option for 24-25. So really they have 1 year of Chris Paul. Eat it for a year, and then you have the cap space for the rebuild. Heck, if somebody's desperate enough, you could flip him at the deadline for draft picks or something. This is how you clear out cap space when you're doing these kinds of deals. It's the same few players being traded for each other, but it's just okay. Can we get a few years off of this by trading for a player towards the end of his contract? That's basically why John Wall kept getting traded, was for the same towards the end of his deal, even though he really barely played the last 3 years, was for that. So I say Washington wins this deal by getting the cap space sooner. Bradley Beal on the court might be better at this stage of the career, but the Lakers have put 2 superstars and a bunch of scrubs because that's all they could fit under the salary cap. So apparently Phoenix is trying to see what they can do with 3 of these insane contracts.
Yeah, but the problem is with Phoenix, essentially, you have a bunch of Robins and Nightwings out there that are kind of by themselves, that don't have that real, like, essentially that Batman alpha where, yeah, you can do that with LeBron and Anthony Davis because that's LeBron James. Yeah, you have Kevin Durant that's as talented as anybody's ever been in the league. And Booker and Beal can shoot and play with anybody. I mean, in terms of the playoff weight of the shoulders, I mean, all 3 of them, I can see them crumbling very easily.
It's going to be.
I mean, what have they done? I mean, Beal, I would say not so much because the opportunities in Washington weren't there. So that's maybe more of an unknown. But what was known is that when he did have that dominant guard next to him, or that dominant player where he could step back and be the 2, that's a recipe that can be successful. It's just obviously the one in John Wall and that Wizards team can only do so much. But if you put Beal with this into now this trio of players with Booker and Durant, yeah, you that talent-wise and X's and O's wise is a recipe for success. It's now just the mental between the ears aspect that needs to be figured out. You'll have a full season to get through it. Hopefully the injuries stay away from this team, and we'll see what they can do. But they seem to be putting all the right pieces, because you have your 3-point shooters. You have Ayton in the middle. We'll see what they do with him. A lot of people think he's very soft and really not that great of a big man. But if he's going to be that no more than a 4 as a 4th option, again, with another year of going through this and hopefully getting mentally hardened, it could go right for them, and Phoenix can get back to the finals and hopefully win it. Well, not for me, hopefully, but for them, hopefully win it.
So I think that, just taking everything that everybody said, to me, what I'm hearing here, taking my own opinion and what the two very smart gentlemen below me said, this is one of those great deals that's a top. Like this is Washington's getting out of some money, freeing up space sooner than later, and Phoenix is getting a player who's probably better than the guy they had. Now, I think the big issue for Phoenix is what Brandon said. I think, Brandon and I, for years now, have been talking about how Durant can be the best player on his team, but he's never going to be the leader of his team. That's Durant. He isn't that full package type of guy. Where Chris Paul was the leader of a team without being the best guy. So what Phoenix has said is, in my opinion, is, Devin, this is your team. You're the leader now. You had a great playoff run. You're A. You may have a better player next to you in Durant, but he is player B. It's your team, and we're going to get you another guy who can peg some threes in Beal. So that's what it is. But Durant can be a little unhappy about not being that number one guy. He wasn't happy when Westbrook was the team leader, even though Durant was the best guy. He wasn't happy with Green being the team leader, even though Durant was the best guy. And when he was the team leader with Kyrie and Harden, the team fell apart. So, Durant has to get behind, I'm not the leader. I'm the best player, which is a strange thing in the NBA. But it's the reality of that team and the way it's built. And so that's what they have to figure out. And that requires coaching. That's where you wish you had Spoelstra or the Zen Master or Riley or somebody else on the team to make it so these guys can do that. There's going to be
Who's the Suns coach now? I didn't see who they hired after getting rid of Monty.
If somebody said the name, I would remember it. Nurses in
Philly.
Yeah, he's my coach.
Frank Vogel.
Okay.
Oh, another empty suit. Okay.
Yeah, just a guy who he made one great defensive play against LeBron. LeBron still scored the basket. I think that was the team that could. That's a team that's going to need a great coach just to manage that. This guy's in charge, and this guy might still be our best player. Again, I still think it's Denver's to lose at this point. Like Brandon said, Ayton is a guy you can trade for two players. You can get two for one for role players and depth, and even that roster out a little bit.
Yeah, depending on what team you work with, maybe you can get three players.
I definitely see the Suns doing that between now and the start of the season. How do you fill out that depth? That's one way to do it.
Yeah, look, it worked for the Lakers trading Westbrook for a bunch of guys. They had the best record after they traded the NBA. They were a formidable team post that trade, and so when you are that top heavy, if you can find that exposable piece to just get just some guys in there, just more bodies who are better than average but not great, just enough guys to make a difference, it can work out for them. But again, they better do that before I take my tack off of Denver.
So you're still standing that Denver won the trade, not either one of the two.
Yeah, I still think that Denver won the trade because it wasn't for Lillard.
Yeah.
For Lillard.
Brandon, who did you decide won this trade? And by the way, also, let me see the shirt you got on, too.
It is the Bobby Boucher.
So basically, you got one fictional sports team. I've got the other fictional NFL team today.
We have two
Same
movie
colorway.
jerseys.
Yeah.
Same colorway.
Except the only difference is yours doesn't smell like your mother-in-law.
No, this was pretty new. So this is
This totally smells.
this still has the lids store smell.
I'd rather have that. But okay, so I'm sorry. Who'd you say won? I totally forgot.
Honestly, just because I am a pure, I don't want to say purist. That sounds pretentious, but I really at the end of the day just want these guys playing ball. So just from that competitive standpoint and on the court, I'll say Phoenix for now. But we'll see how it plays out. We'll see what it does. I understand teams having to kind of have a reboot or a year of figuring things out before they really take that next step. But Washington, that's kind of been what you've been doing since you became the Wizards. So, at some point that clock's got to, hit zero eventually. So yeah, just for those reasons, I'll say Phoenix, but that is a pending answer, and I reserve the right to change.
Okay. I will not judge you on that one. Anyone going to judge on that, or are we all good?
No, I think we're good.
Checks out for me.
Yeah,
I get it.
All right. So time will ultimately tell on something like this, but well, I think basically I will probably go with JD's point on this. You know, the 1 year, be done, flush it, restart, pick up another Supermax contract of some kind, lather, rinse, and repeat. But this, at the end of the day, I think surprised some, but didn't surprise a lot. You know, and you have to wonder how much Chris Paul has left in the tank at this point too. I mean, how many years has it been since Alfonso Ribeiro played him in commercials?
Those commercials have been around for what, like 3-4 years now?
At least.
I think weren't those commercials when he was on the Clippers, or were they the commercials started on the Clippers?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah.
Alfonso was when he was on Houston, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, he's been on the Clippers, Houston, and now Phoenix, and he's made strong playoff runs with all three teams. And that was before he didn't get traded to the Lakers. I mean, this guy's long in the tooth. Don't question it.
He's 30. I think he's 39, 38, 39.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's pretty close to the same age as Alfonso Ribeiro almost. Although to be fair, he did pull off a good Chris Paul. I'm sorry, I dug that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like car insurance commercials typically, but I did dig that one.
Yeah, those ones were pretty decent.
So
yeah.
All right, so are we good on that?
They're better than the Aaron Rodgers State Farm commercials.
So, yes. Well, basically, when he parlays this ultimately into possibly a Jeopardy contract or whatever he's going to be doing, why ever he's in the New York area and what he was trying to build here, which I suspect is tied to the end of his career. Possibly Broadway. Maybe he'll invest in Broadway.
I see a Aaron Rodgers, Joe Namath State Farm commercial at some point this football season.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense. You know what? What? Joe Namath is what? 80 years old, 82 years old, something like that?
I think it's like 78, something like that.
But he's spry. He's still living it up.
Well, he got famous off basically bad voting, so my mind only. Fourth best player in that Super Bowl.
Yeah, well, we started a tradition with Joe Namath. When in doubt, give it to the quarterback.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah,
especially Broadway, in this case.
Even as a Jets fan, I will say all day, Matt Snell deserved the MVP in that game.
Yep.
No, it's okay. We know. Look, please let's not go down the idea of a single football game having the most valuable player in what we want to call the ultimate team sport. That is the dumbest award to me. I think I've said it every year in all sports. The MVP of a single game of football. Nope.
100 yards rushing, 100 yards receiving, two interceptions as a defender, or when it comes down to it, quarterback. That's the only four that ever win.
Yeah,
that's fine. But then if Philly wins and one of they get Super Bowl MVP, you got to hate it. You got to be consistent.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I hate the award. I think there are probably, if we went over the Super Bowl 4 or 5 times where somebody truly took over a game and deserved the award. It's an award that sometimes they give out, like Manning's. When Peyton Manning won with Indianapolis, it was like, well, who do we give it to? I mean, that's one of the most clear examples of like, and the quarterback.
Marketing.
When in doubt, give it to the winning quarterback. That's usually how it is.
Yeah. When who was it, Burris, or was it for
Holmes.
Pittsburgh? It was what?
Holmes. It was Santonio.
Meanwhile, the most important play of that game was clearly the interception for the touchdown at the end of the half, right? That was the play that changed the entire game. Yeah. Yeah, like Kyle says. Just give it to the quarterback.
Well, actually, I will say I'll close out on one thing since I'm just changing that real quick. I did see for Lehigh Lafayette, the rivalry, which is one of the oldest college football rivalries in the country. They gave the MVP to the kicker who kicked one field goal at the end of the game at 27 yards. And it's like the guy that had, basically had the interception in the end zone to keep his team from actually
the game-winning field goal.
He didn't get it in his final game. The kicker nailing a 28-yarder. That dude's your MVP this time around.
That's because those two schools did the math on it. And they're like, That was the play that changed the winning percentage the most. We're giving it to the kicker.
Dude, I it's funny. Lafayette had a terrible season that year, and head coach John Garrett, I think, brother Garrett, Jason Garrett's brother. They treated that thing like a Super Bowl win, even though they only won 4 wins the entire season.
Did they win that game 3-0? Is that why they gave it to the kicker?
It was like 17-14. It wasn't that high, but
it was a game-winning field goal.
There was a dude that had a pick in the end zone to keep keep Lehigh from scoring. No, he didn't get the he didn't get the MVP. The guy that ran for 100 yards, he didn't get it. The guy who nailed the chip shot as a Division III kicker, that's the guy. Oh yes, thank you. Yes. It's 30 years next year for that movie too.
Wow.
By the way, didn't we cancel that movie?
We are. That movie has been.
It is not aged well.
It is not. Yeah.
I rewatched it recently. I'll just say that there's a lot of jokes in that movie that have not aged well.
Yeah. So. All right. Well, one joke that actually probably will last for at least a little while. The NHL playoffs. And more specifically, in this case, the TV ratings for the NHL playoffs and specifically the Stanley Cup Finals. This is a joke that's going to last for a while because, dear God in heaven, these ratings were crap. JD, you had mentioned something earlier, so I pulled up the ratings in this case just for funsies. The 2023 NBA Finals, Denver, Miami, 5 games, which actually this is a good comparison. Both went 5 games. Both had a team from Florida and both had a team from the Midwest, and Denver and Vegas aren't really that far apart. So it kind of works out in this case. The average rating on that series for 5 games was 11.64 million. Okay. Not bad.
It's for the NBA?
For the NBA Finals, the average across 5 games, 11.6. Mm-hmm. Do you guys have any guess of what it was across 3 different networks, by the way, for the NHL Stanley Cup Finals?
1.3?
Sub 1.
Yeah,
I'd say 1.5.
2.6.
Okay.
But it took 3 networks to pull that off. So in this case, between
which are on cable, so it's not really an even up comparison.
Well, here's the funny thing about it, 2.6. Last year, when it was on ABC and also ESPN Plus, it was 4.6 with Tampa and Colorado. So what's funny about this is I'm scrolling through the best ever ratings for the NHL the Stanley Cup Finals was 2013. The Blackhawks and the Bruins went 6, averaged 5.
Original 6 teams.
What's that?
2 original 6 teams always get higher ratings.
That only pulled their record overall 5.7 million. That was their best ever. Was still about half of what the NBA Finals was this year.
That is a struggling viewership because this NBA Finals was not a very glamorous matchup. I mean, everyone was saying how it was going to be rough with all the other opportunities for teams to have gone in it.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say this: usually when it comes to hockey, I'm at least paying attention to who's up in what series, what's going on. Mm-hmm. But at this point, once the Boston Bruins got eliminated, and then I was like, okay, well, there's 2 Canadian teams left. When you have enough of a headway
mm-hmm.
that the NHL had with the Boston Bruins, enough people I think were interested in that story, and
mm-hmm.
then it got cut off, and I think that was brutal for the NHL. That story would be cut in the first round in such a way where, mm-hmm. on the other hand, people I put my eyes on a period or two of that game.
And soccer, baseball and soccer.
Yeah, oh, good Yankees.
I was saying that with the Rangers Devils that it sucked that they were in the first round.
Yeah.
There's
something magical about those two, basically an Eastern Conference final. But how much of a concern do you think this is for the NHL? Because that was 3 different networks. I mean, one of them was True TV. And Obi and I were joking about it prior. It's like, well, if one game ran late, did they just bump Impractical Jokers? Or did they preempt the Stanley Cup Finals for Impractical Jokers?
Well, for this is the, as I read in one article, the NHL signed up for this.
Mm-hmm.
TNT and Warner Brothers Discovery threw enough money at the NHL to split the national TV deal with ESPN and ABC. So the trade-off is they get the finals every other year. So while it looks bad in press releases, and also Gary Bettman has insisted on this stupid Sunbelt strategy and forcing teams in places that don't have any kind of history of hockey or ice.
Mhm.
And they wonder, wow, the ratings are terrible. Yes, and they also, and the team that you gave a rigged expansion draft, managed to be very good very quickly. Shocker, and so between Vegas, who just came from nothing and won a cup within 6 years, the Panthers, who rode a hot goaltender to the Stanley Cup final, where they met reality of a team that now Vegas was good for the whole year. That is a good parallel to Denver, where they were a team that was supposed to go deep and was good for the whole season, whereas the South Florida teams got hot at the end of the season. And with Vegas, they scored a touchdown in 3 of these games. The clincher was 9-3.
Yeah,
and this was also the first game in which all of the games were on cable and not on a traditional antenna broadcast network.
Well, prior to the ABC deal, they were on NBC for years too.
Right, but they would split like game 1 and game 2 and 3 on NBC Sports Network, but any of the clincher games were on mainline NBC. TNT doesn't have an antenna channel to pair it off with, so that's why they preempted Impractical Jokers.
Which, by the way, that was Game 5 was the lowest rated NHL Stanley Cup final game ever, at 1.4 million for Game 5. I'm sorry, 2.7 million.
Right, because Vegas clobbered them 9-3.
Yeah,
like that's an embarrassment.
pulled a 1.4 rating.
So this goes back to something I think I've said in the past about playoffs and too many teams and you get too many upsets. One of the things about the playoffs is there's a story, right? I mean, you can't help it. There is a story that goes along with the season. And in the NBA, you had a great story because you had this guy Joker, who there was backlash on him possibly winning the 3rd championship. I think people wanted to see what Joker was about. I mean, he was starting to put up unbelievable stats. So people who are semi-connected to the sport are watching. And then you have Miami, which is this glamorous team. And if you've watched Sports Center at all, you've heard of the Miami culture. So they had these nice storylines to bring together. Vegas, there's a little storyline about how they had this weird draft thing and they were the greatest expansion team in the history of sports. And could they finally complete this thing? But Florida was like, hey, this team's a fluke. Hey, this team's a fluke. They keep winning. And then they got their butts handed to them in the first game. And I think everyone was like, oh, okay, I see how this is going to go. And immediately lost interest. And so part of the problem with too many teams in the playoffs is sometimes when you have a fluky situation, you got to find the storylines. And there's not enough coverage of hockey and enough voices on hockey to find the storyline, to bring delight, to bring these semi-would-be interested people into it. And that is why they got to get, hockey's biggest issue to me is there's not enough places where I'm just being lightly touched when I listen to my own sports local radio station and a little bit on the Flyers. I don't know how much Rangers and Devils you guys get up north compared to your Cowboys. Yeah. So
only in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And it depends on the show you listen to, on the host.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if there's none of that,
Boomer will talk about hockey in the morning show since he's a hockey fan.
Okay.
That's related to one.
That's the other key thing about all sports is there's got to be some groundswell of just here's the story that's happening into the sport. Here's just a little teaser every little bit of time. So you're like, oh, what's going on? Like I knew about Boston. I was interested in Boston. But that was one of the 16 teams and they went out in the first round. And then this was the chance that this is going to be one of the greatest teams of all time. And now it's eliminated. Now, if you had a 4-team playoff or you increase their chances of going longer and keeping that team involved. So that's the NBA playoffs are known for being particularly hectic. I don't think they're as hectic, technically speaking, as baseball playoffs, but still their unpredictability creates situations where you can't have a storyline that goes and can drag casual fans in.
And additionally, also, Vegas, I just checked the attendance numbers. Vegas was 12th in the NHL this year in average attendance, and the Panthers were 7th worst. So this is very middle of the pack to even borderline low pack teams here. So this also, to my mind, I'm going to open this up to you guys in a second. Is this a concern across Vegas? I mean, you had a team literally in a championship for, I think, the first time ever in your city. And did anybody really care?
No, there was just as many people outside the stadium as there were in it. The whole place was a giant party. And, for something that's a traditional non-hockey market, 12th is pretty good. They pack the house. Vegas packs the house pretty good out there. This will not translate to the A's, though. That much I can say.
Didn't Vegas make the Cup their first year?
Yes. They did. Yeah,
they made the finals.
Right, they made it. And I remember.
And there's a story behind that one too that also led to the ratings being higher there too.
Yeah, they made the finals twice.
So, but that's
and the conference finals 4 times in 6 years.
Yeah, they have been traditionally a good team.
You're still pulling 12th overall, and you're pulling those numbers since your inception.
So I have a question about those numbers, Scott. If you can find it, it'd be great.
I'll try.
What are they pulling in terms of percentage of the size of the house that they're packing?
You know what? Hang on a sec.
And also one of the things for Vegas always is going to be, it's not a big city. I mean, it's a tiny little city. So they have to rely on people coming to Vegas and going, let's catch a hockey game. Let's catch a football game. Let's catch a baseball game. So that is a problem for them. It's a tiny city.
It's basically the same size as Milwaukee. It's basically hot Milwaukee was one of what I read one author writing about the demographic size.
The stadium can hold 20,000 and they're averaging just a hair over 18,000 a game. 18,026. So 90% on average.
Okay, so they're not.
It's still solid.
Yeah.
I think part of the problem is, and well, going back to their first year making the Cup, that in itself is a storyline of storylines. Your first year in existence, you literally get to the Stanley Cup final where there are teams and God knows how many years of existence that haven't even made the
There was an
the
impassioned
so there's
factor that happened inside the city that year.
But part of the problem is honestly is ESPN and how they treat the sport honestly like dog shit.
Yep.
They really do. They have ESPN doesn't have a dedicated cut or real solid percentage of coverage within all of the ESPN different shows and stuff like that. It's first off, and I get it during the season and with football, but we don't need 6 hours in a row of NFL, this afternoon or whatever it is. You gotta make, and because during there's hockey season. Hockey season is at that point either in training camp or it's just started. So the same thing with NBA, but there's got to be that the passing around between the TV deals and all that stuff, I don't think is very helpful at all. You have the ESPN that treats them like crap, and then you have, Fox Sports and that picks them up, but they're too new really to have that kind of impact where there's this new wave of following of the sport. You have a lot of NBC's coverage of the sport, but NBC Sports is third on their tier of importance between their regular cable channel.
The NBC Sports channel doesn't even exist anymore. That's right. That's how well they just got rid of the channel and basically shifted all the programming to USA.
Yeah, no,
exactly. So
I totally.
That's really part of the problem too.
That is exactly what I'm saying, right? Because I could right now go watch. For when I was watching TV, they did 5 good minutes once a week on PTI, right? That was all I saw in the NHL. Meanwhile, a half hour earlier, there was an hour of the NFL during the offseason, and before that, an hour of the NBA. So what the NHL, Bateman needs to do is the next time he makes a deal, he's got to insist with ESPN and say, I'll give it to you for nothing. Give me a show called Inside the NHL and put it on after PTI before your Sports Center. Or, that's the deal Bateman needs. Is he needs inside the NHL, even if it's only a half-hour show, to build those storylines so that I'm watching accidentally. Oh, this is what's happening in the NHL. These are the players. These are who's good. This is who's bad. Oh, these are the guys that should be interested in the playoffs if Boston goes out.
Part of ESPN's issue is that the people that they have covering the sport are tough to watch. Let's say they do have an inside the NHL type of show, but it shows at midnight on ESPN too.
If people are assigned,
and it has Barry Melrose, who's quite possibly the worst announcer in the game. And he has for some reason been a centerpiece of ESPN's hockey coverage for decades.
Now I will say
nobody likes him.
TNT. I mean, Kenny Albert. I like Kenny Albert. I have always been a big
TNT is a solid crew.
He is a solid crew.
But again, that's something that's too new, where they can't have the impact to bring in that another wave of fans or bring that casual fandom to take notice it in certain cup runs and stuff like that.
They have Wayne Gretzky, the great one, as part of their crew. What more do they need to do?
Yeah, PK Subban he's disappeared at this point. I mean, he had a suave and a swagger throughout his career. He's just kind of buried. He's just there.
Yeah,
and that's what it is too. I don't. There's also this, and it's kind of like the baseball problem where to create storylines, you need the emotion, you need the attachment, and to get the emotion and attachment, you need that personal and intimate exposure to these players. How personal do we get with these NBA players? How personal do we get with a lot of these NFL players? Obviously, it's not so much because there's that many more players, but you have to do that. In baseball, you still can, but hockey, obviously, it's tough because even with the NFL, the masks come off sometimes. It's not completely covering so the NFL or the NHL needs more of that personable marketing thing that really baseball needs as well. And all of that, you put it in a blender, and that's all of these issues are why the NHL has those numbers that they have, the ratings and stuff like that.
They should get rid of the helmets then. Just go Craig McCavish.
No, I'm not saying that. No, but you gotta be able to make some type of moves around that to really, because being honest, and this is not just Vegas. This is even a lot of guys on our own teams that we like. We see guys that look like this every single day of our lives. We necessarily don't see with baseball or with basketball and football, they're like overpowering, right? They're tall, they're huge, they have a lot of the flair. And NHL guys are a lot of your everyday guys that just happen to be professional hockey players.
Yeah.
So that I think that's all part of it.
And a lot of them, frankly, aren't that interesting of people.
Right.
There isn't much to market because they don't say much.
They are very vanilla. A lot of Europeans have
I gotta find the guys. I don't know.
Yeah, I saw an interview with Shaq the other day, and he's like, "I have
their marketing departments.
Shaq is
pay people to do that."
I saw an interview with Shaq the other day. He's like, "There are kids who come up to me who are not old enough to have seen me play, and they know who I am."
The general,
because Shaq owns a whole bunch of Shaq, right? Shaq is huge. His personality is almost as big as he is, and you're right. Honestly, the last hockey player I could think of that made an impact on me is Eric Lindros. I mean, that's how long it's been since it's been up. Great. I understand that the guy whose name is escaping me in Philly are two of the greatest hockey players to ever live. And I don't know nothing about them. Nothing. There's no connection. You're 100% right. No, nothing.
There's no
the league tried to
players from Europe. You don't have bombastic personalities there.
That's also part of it. You basically the NHL is the majority of the players in the league are like Jokic, where they're just I'm going to show up, do my thing, job is done, I can go home. Type of personalities. And when the NHL does try marketing superstars, they're bad at it. They did try to shove Crosby down everybody's throats for a few years, but he's not really that likable of a character. and some of his and it got to the point they'll market a player that doesn't deserve it, and that just does nothing but upset hockey fans.
Although, to be fair,
and Crosby did that. The entirety of the Vegas Knights do that, where the feeling among hockey fans was the league rigged it for this team. Mm-hmm. So I have no interest in watching the finals, and the games were terrible. And with the upsets, as you mentioned, Obi, there's two other events that I can think of that are good comparisons for the Stanley Cup Finals this year. One is the 2007 World Series, which is the worst one I've seen in my lifetime, where Colorado went on a tear and just blew through the National League and then got absolutely blasted by the Red Sox in the World Series. A World Series so memorable. The most memorable thing about that World Series was the news leaking that A-Rod was opting out of his contract with the Yankees. That's the most memorable thing about that Red Sox-Rockies World Series. And another comparison is the NCAA tournament, March Madness earlier this year, where because there were so many big fish, the Final Four was UConn and some Cinderellas, which was cool, but also left you with, Cinderella can only go so far from a marketing standpoint before, as far as marketing appeal. So you definitely saw some of that.
You can't have one without the other and then expect there to be that full throttle interest.
Well, I think also in the melting pot that is the United States, the United Nations, United States, if you look at the team that we're looking at right here, that's just basically just a bunch of European dudes there,
Canadians.
They're just a bunch of, honestly, at the end of the day, it's just a bunch of white dudes, So as a result, I think it doesn't, look close on that one. I think it doesn't appeal to some demographics in there because there's no diversity, there's no melting pot, there's no United Nations. Like I said, at the end of the day, it's just like white guy, white guy, white guy, white guy, white guy, white coach, and as a result, there's nothing different about it. And I think that difference is what's needed a little bit there too.
So, although I don't write that off, right? Like, I think if most of us were to ask our friends what sport they like more, basketball or hockey, you get a sense of who they are just by that answer, right? Mm-hmm. There's a certain sense of that. It's not 100%, but there is some of that to that. But I think that being said, there's still the sport itself is still fantastic, right? When you,
yes,
like. One of my greatest hockey memories is watching the U.S. Canada with my father-in-law in the Olympics. This is a man who loves sports, does not watch hockey, and two of us were just enthralled by the Olympic game, the speed of it. There's some mucky muck that goes on with NHL hockey where the diehard fans want the fighting in the game, and then other people go, "I can't get into this because not only is there fighting, but you let the fight. Then there's like." I can go on and on about how dumb I think hockey fighting is because I get what people say the point is. And so then you take a few people out to keep some people in. And then this sort of image comes into people's head again. So I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that the fans of hockey kind of can put on themselves. But it doesn't – I don't think it being mostly white – is going to kill it if it markets better and can make people interested in. Like people of all races love Peyton Manning. He's a great personality and a great player. People of all races find Tom Brady to be completely boring and please stop marketing him because he's a great player but not a great personality. So they got to find more options on people to market till they hit without
Baseball
making.
But again,
those sports, the NFL has variety in it.
Yes.
Yes. You look at obviously we'll use the Giants as an example. Daniel Jones as white as snow there. Saquon offsets. The personality of Saquon offsets the vanilla of Daniel Jones. That makes a good story. It makes a good tandem there. And
absolutely.
I think it makes it more interesting as a result. Here, like I said, it looks honestly just looks boring.
Baseball and hockey are regional sports, whereas the NBA and the NFL are national sports.
Mm-hmm.
Soccer is an international sport. But baseball is now a regional sport.
Mm-hmm.
The NHL, despite this, while I understand the strategy of trying to expand to more markets and bring more fans in, the way that with the Sunbelt strategy that Bettman has done over the past 25 years, in practice, there is some success and there's some complete failures, like Arizona playing in a college arena because they've been evicted from a pro arena, but they still will not allow them to relocate the team. But hockey it's growing.
Mm-hmm.
It is still growing, and it is the total revenue of the sport does lag behind the other three. Although I would like to see side-by-side numbers over the past 5 years of MLB versus NHL, as far as I wouldn't be surprised if the numbers are going like this, or at least baseball's plateauing. And soccer is, we all know that soccer is the fastest growing.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I think what's also interesting too about hockey is that maybe correct me if I'm wrong, because especially Scott and JD, you are more hockey than I am, but I don't necessarily see hockey as a very highlightable sport, right? Like, there are not too many times where we're even in the most, in the deepest playoff games in a cup, you got those plays where it's like, oh, did you see that play last night? Did you see that goal? Like, there's only so much you can do, I think, on ice and on skates and with a stick, right? And so I think that, so I think that aspect of the flair of the kind of explosive plays that can kind of come out of nowhere, or something like that, or like a dunk, where LeBron drives down and dunks on Jason Terry on back in Miami on the alley-oop. Like that is a play that you're going to see in 50, 75, 100 years. How many hockey plays can you say that about, other than kind of in these big major moments? And even still, it's more about the moment. It's not the actual physical display of the play, is what I guess I'm trying to say. Like, you see a lot of the cross stick and stuff like that, the twirling, on some of these penalty shots where you kind of see that kind of artistry. But I think within the confines of how hockey is played, I think there's part of that that you can't have, that some of these other sports can have.
I would say partially disagree. Where I do think that there are maybe not as many as there are in basketball and football, but there absolutely are highlightable and clippable moments. And as far as athletic ability, I would say go watch some Marty Brodeur highlights. I didn't want to.
Yeah, I'm not trying to take
people would be more interested
away.
in a touchdown or a dunk
just
than
saying,
they would be a goal.
What the human can do on skates, on ice, just the limitations of that alone, I think is not a part of the lack of why hockey kind of has these numbers. It's just the part of more of the media aspect, more of the getting that casual, or getting that hockey fan to show a casual friend, hey, did you see this play last night, or something like that.
By the way,
that's where I was trying to go.
And in the past, fights have filled in the gap with that, but the league has been very proactive over the past 10, 20 years in trying to push that out of the game. So there are certain, as was mentioned before, there are certain subset. I think there's definitely a fine line as far as marketing of trying to appeal to a broader audience, but not upset your diehards at the same time. And hockey has done a very bad job at trying to find that happy medium.
I think
so is baseball.
To Brandon's point there, right? One of the things about the new rules of baseball is what people are saying. Like, I've heard other other guys who play sports that we consider better athletes than baseball, saying the problem with baseball is you don't get to see how athletic these dudes are because the rules were such that to optimize the game, you de-optimize their athleticism.
Mhm.
The greatest sports thing I've ever seen, by the way, the greatest play I ever saw was at a hockey game. Guy is on a breakaway. The goalie checks him below the waist, puts him in the air. He's now horizontal. He gets his stick down and wrists it into the net. It was unbelievable. The most amazing thing I ever did. That guy, by the way, was Wayne Gretzky. So, I mean, it was unbelievable. But, yeah, I do hear what you're saying. Even if you just watch the top 10, sometimes if you compare a simple slam dunk to a simple one-timer, the slam dunk looks cooler. You're
it's
100%
overpowering.
Yes.
It's an overpowering
Yeah.
move.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about it's even with a touchdown, it's about one, player, wide receiver, overpowering a quarterback, for example.
Right.
You know, with a slam dunk, it's overpowering the opponent. It's a dominate move, really. You know,
Right.
a one-timer or a bunch of clever passes doesn't have that same kind of dominant spark. It looks gorgeous, but
In
it doesn't
baseball,
have-
they're overpowering a ball.
Yeah, I mean, listen,
Right.
a 450-foot shot is overpowering the pitcher. So I think maybe that's, from a highlight standpoint, that may be, just a theory, what could be part of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. All right. So, all right, gents, anything else you think? Or are we good?
I'm glad you guys let me come back after my hiatus. Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, we
course.
appreciated the money you paid us for that, too.
Happy to have you. Mhm.
Yeah. No, always, man, as always. So, all right, let me get rid of that. There we go. All right, gents. So thanks as always for tuning in. I appreciate Obi, Brandon, JD. I appreciate your input on everything with Bradley Beals versus Chris Paul and all that. The TV ratings and everything you guys were part of. Appreciate Kyle for commenting in. Everybody else who's watching, appreciate you guys as well. Thanks as always. Next time, appreciate